There is a metal bucket sitting next to my wood stove right now. It is half full of cold gray ash from last night's fire. I am going to take that bucket out to the garden this morning, walk the perimeter of every bed, and lay down a line of that ash along the soil. It will cost me nothing. It will take 20 minutes. And the slugs that have been cutting through my wife's cabbage every night, the ants marching in a steady line across the porch threshold, the beetles working through the stored grain in the corner of the barn. By the end of this week, they will all be gone. The ash has been sitting in that bucket since last night. It has been doing this job on farms like mine since before anyone now living was born. My name is Levi Troyer. I am Amish. I farm 61 acres in Holmes County, Ohio. I have never signed a pest control contract. I have never called an exterminator. I have never paid a man in a white truck to walk the perimeter of my land and spray chemicals from a canister on his back. But I know what that truck costs you, because my neighbor Daniel, good man, moved into a house down the road about 8 years ago with a half-acre kitchen garden his wife had been wanting her whole life. He called me one June morning sounding tired in the way a man sounds when something has been draining him slowly for a long time. The slugs had taken half his lettuce. The ants had found the pantry. Something was working through the base of his tomato plants, and he could not figure out what. He had bought 4 different sprays from the hardware store over the course of the spring. Each one worked for a week or two, and then whatever he had sprayed came back, sometimes in larger numbers than before, as if the spray had simply cleared space for the stronger ones to move in. Then he called the pest company. The man came out, walked the yard, wrote up an estimate. $800 a year, monthly visits, a different chemical for each pest, each season, rotating so the insects could not build resistance. And not just this year, every year, for as long as Daniel owned that house and that garden. Because the ants would be back in the spring, and the slugs with the first wet week of May, and the beetles whenever the grain got stored. And the company's business model depended on every single one of those things being true. Daniel asked me what I did. I told him. He looked at me the way people look at you when the answer embarrasses them with its simplicity. I told him to clean out his wood stove. Before I show you how to use it, I want you to understand what ash actually is, because once you understand it, the rest of this makes simple sense, and you will never forget it. When wood burns completely, what remains is not just carbon. It is a concentrated mineral residue, potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, the same minerals that were in the living tree, compressed now into a fine alkaline powder. The pH of dry wood ash runs between 9 and 11. Some hardwood ash pushes to 12. That is strongly alkaline, strongly enough that it changes the chemistry of any surface it sits on, any creature that walks through it, any soil it is worked into. That alkalinity is the first weapon. Most soft-bodied insects, slugs, caterpillars, aphids, the larval stages of beetles, have a thin, permeable outer layer that is exquisitely sensitive to pH. When a slug crosses a line of dry wood ash, the alkaline particles begin drawing moisture from its body through that outer skin. It is not a poison. It is not a chemical attack in the way we usually mean that phrase. It is physics. The ash is simply more alkaline than the slug's body can tolerate, and the moisture moves from where there is more to where there is less, the same way it always does, until the slug can no longer sustain itself. My grandfather explained it to me when I was about 8 years old, standing in the garden on a wet morning in May. He pointed to a slug on the soil and he said, "The slug is mostly water. Ash is dry and hungry. Put dry and hungry next to mostly water, and the water moves." That is all it is. I did not fully understand the chemistry then, but I understood the image, and the image was right. The second weapon is the texture. Ground ash, particularly from hardwood, like oak or hickory, is microscopically sharp. Not sharp in the way a blade is sharp. You can run it through your fingers with no sensation of roughness at all. But at the scale of an insect's leg joints, at the scale of the waxy coating on a beetle's exoskeleton, those particles are abrasive enough to scratch. They work the same way the old farmers described it, like walking barefoot across fine broken glass, except you cannot feel the glass until it has already done its work. This is why ash handles insects that have built up resistance to chemical sprays. Resistance is a biological response to a poison. The creatures whose chemistry happens to tolerate a spray survive, breed, and pass that tolerance on. But no creature can develop a biological response to being dried out by alkalinity and abraded by mineral particles. The physics do not negotiate. The ash works the same on the third generation as on the first. The third weapon is the potassium. Soil worked with wood ash over time becomes inhospitable to the burrowing insects, fungus gnats, root maggots, wireworms that lay their eggs in the ground near plant roots. The elevated potassium changes the soil chemistry enough that those insects move on to find a more hospitable place. This is why our gardens, which have been receiving wood ash for generations, simply do not have the wireworm and root maggot problems that the English neighbors deal with in their first few years of gardening. Now I have to be honest with you about what ash does not do, because I will not let you think it is magic. It does not work wet. Wet ash is spent ash. The alkalinity is there, but the physical mechanism, the sharp dry particles, the moisture-drawing power, goes to sleep the moment the ash clumps with water. Rain kills it. Morning dew can soften it enough to reduce its effectiveness significantly. This is the most common reason people try ash once and give up. They put it down in the evening, the dew comes overnight, and by morning it is doing almost nothing. I will show you how to work around this. It does not work well on hard-shelled insects with thick exoskeletons. Ash will slow down a Japanese beetle, but it will not stop one the way it stops a slug or a caterpillar. For the hard-shelled ones, ash is part of the answer, not the whole answer. I will tell you what to combine it with. And it does not work on flying insects. Ash is a ground weapon, a threshold weapon, a barrier weapon. It has no effect on anything that does not have to walk through it. Know what it is for, and it will serve you. Those honest limits are worth more than any exaggeration. Now let me show you exactly how to use it, in every situation where it earns its keep, the way my grandfather walked me through it on those May mornings when the garden needed attention and the ash bucket was already full from the previous night's fire. The most important use, the one that pays back the most for the least effort, is the perimeter line. You take dry ash, and I will tell you in a moment how to keep it dry, and you lay a continuous line about 2 inches wide around any bed, any threshold, any area you are trying to protect. The line needs to be unbroken. A slug or an ant will find the gap the way water finds the low point. One gap anywhere in the line and you have spent your effort for nothing. For garden beds, lay the line right at the soil edge, just inside the border. For the porch threshold, lay it across the full width of the doorway. For the base of a fruit tree whose bark is being worked by beetles, circle the trunk with a ring of ash 2 or 3 inches from the bark, kept dry under the canopy if you can manage it. 2 inches wide is enough. You do not need a thick wall. You need an unbroken line of dry alkaline abrasive that any crawling pest has to cross to reach what you are protecting. For slugs specifically, and slugs are the creature ash handles better than almost anything else you can buy, apply after the dew has burned off in the morning or in the late afternoon before dusk, but after any rain has dried. Slugs move at night. If your line is dry when they come, they will not cross it. A dry line laid at 4 in the afternoon on a clear day is your best protection for the coming night. My wife has a half-acre kitchen garden. She grows cabbage, kale, lettuce, chard, strawberries. Every one of those plants is a slug magnet in a wet Ohio spring. She loses almost nothing to slugs. The ash line around each bed, relayed after every rain, is all we have ever used. I asked her once how long she thought we had been doing it this way. She said her grandmother did it, her grandmother's mother before that. It was just what you did. It was so obvious a thing that nobody thought to write it down, because why would you write down something everyone already knew? That is the saddest part of what has happened to this knowledge. It was so common, so unremarkable, that no one preserved it carefully. And then one generation forgot to pass it on, and the next generation was handed a spray bottle, and now here we are. For ants, ash works differently than it works on slugs. Ants are harder shelled and more persistent. A single line of ash will slow an ant column, but determined ants will eventually find a way through, especially if the ash softens at all. For ants, the combination that works is ash plus salt. Lay your ash line as I described, then sprinkle a thin line of coarse salt directly on top of it. Salt draws moisture from an ant's body through the same osmotic mechanism as the ash, and the combination of the two creates a barrier that ant colonies consistently avoid rather than probe. I have used this at the base of our pantry door for 15 years. Not one ant column inside that pantry in 15 years. The combination costs nothing. We always have ash and we always have salt, and the only maintenance is relaying after rain. For the porch threshold, for any doorway where ants are coming in from outside, the ash and salt line across the full width of the opening is the first thing I do every spring. Before I do anything else in the garden, before I even look at what the winter has done to the raised beds. I lay the threshold lines first, because once the ants find a trail into the house, breaking the habit of it takes longer than preventing it in the first place. For beetles in stored grain, and this is the one that matters most to anyone who stores dry goods in any quantity, ash is used differently. You do not make a perimeter line around the grain. You mix a small amount of dry ash directly into the stored grain, a cup or two worked through every 50 pounds, coating every kernel lightly. The ash on the surface of the grain abrades the beetle's body and disrupts the waxy layer that holds its moisture. Beetles that feed on ash-treated grain do not survive long. The grain itself is unaffected. The ash washes off in water, and the body passes the fine mineral without any trouble. My grandmother kept a small wooden scoop of ash in the corner of the grain room specifically for this purpose. New grain went in, the ash went in with it, and she stirred the whole bin with a wooden paddle until everything was lightly coated. The grain kept for 2 years without a weevil. The bin was never treated with anything else. For the garden soil itself, ash worked in over time builds a lasting resistance to the soil-dwelling insects I mentioned earlier. Each fall, after the last harvest, I spread a thin layer of ash over every garden bed and work it lightly into the top 2 inches of soil with a fork. Not a heavy application, a thin, even dusting. Over years, this has changed the soil chemistry of our garden beds in ways that the burrowing insects simply do not like. Root maggots have not been a serious problem on this farm in my lifetime. My grandfather said the same thing about his grandfather's farm. I should say a word for the folks who do not have a garden. No beds, no barn, no half-acre plot. Maybe a balcony, a stoop, a small patio, an apartment threshold with ants coming under the door every spring. The ash line works just the same. A coffee can of dry ash is enough to treat every threshold in a standard apartment, every balcony edge, every windowsill where something has been coming in. You do not need land. You need a dry line in the right place. The scale changes. The principle does not. Now, the question I promised to answer, how do you keep the ash dry? This is everything. Wet ash is useless. Dry ash is the tool. Most people who try this fail not because ash does not work, but because they cannot keep it dry long enough for it to work. The answer is storage and timing. Store your ash in a metal container with a tight-fitting lid, a metal bucket with a lid, an old cast iron pot, any container that keeps moisture out. Keep it inside or under cover until you are ready to use it. Never store ash in a paper bag or an open container outside. It will pull moisture from the air overnight and be half useless by morning. For outdoor application, carry your ash out in the covered container and open it only when you are ready to lay the line. Apply in dry weather, not before rain. If rain is coming in the next 12 hours, wait. After rain, wait for the soil surface to dry, usually half a day of good weather, before relaying. For the most exposed locations, where rain or dew hits the line directly, you can mix your ash with a small amount of diatomaceous earth, equal parts. The diatomaceous earth is more resistant to moisture than ash alone, and the combination holds its effectiveness longer between applications. Both materials are available at any farm store. Both cost almost nothing. Together they make a barrier that lasts through light dew and handles a wider range of insects than either alone. Some of our people add a tablespoon of cayenne pepper to the ash mixture for ant lines specifically. Cayenne does not harm the ant the way ash does. It does not desiccate or abrade, but ants have a strong aversion to it and will route around a cayenne-marked line even when they might probe through ash alone. The combination is particularly effective at doorways where you need the line to hold without relaying every day. Most people think of pest control as a spring and summer problem. The slugs come with the May rains, the ants find the pantry in June, and by October the thinking is that the cold has handled everything until next year. That thinking is exactly why the same problems come back every spring in the same places with the same intensity. The insects that trouble your garden in May are not arriving from somewhere else. They wintered over. They laid eggs in the fall in the soil at the base of your beds, in the leaf litter along the fence line, in the dark corner behind the woodpile where nothing disturbed them. The slug that crosses your threshold in April hatched from an egg that was sitting 6 inches from that threshold since September. This is why fall is the most important time to work ash into the soil. Not spring, when the damage is already starting. Fall, when the eggs are being laid and the overwintering insects are finding their places. A light dressing of ash worked into the top 2 inches of every bed in October changes the pH of the soil just enough, raises the mineral content just enough that many of those eggs do not survive the winter, and many of those insects choose a different place to shelter. By the time May comes, you are not fighting a population that has been building since September. You are starting the season with a clean slate. My grandfather did his heaviest ash application in the last week of October after the final harvest before the first hard frost. He called it putting the garden to bed properly. Every bed got a thin, even coat of ash, worked in lightly, and left for the winter. By spring, the ash had been absorbed into the soil. The pH had settled, and the garden started the season in better condition than it ended the previous one. Year after year, the pest pressure in our garden has been lower than in any neighboring plot I have ever seen. That October habit is a large part of why. Cost of all of this: 0. If you have a wood stove or a fireplace, you are already making the ash. You have been throwing it away or spreading it on the compost pile without knowing what else it could do. If you do not have a wood stove, a 20-pound bag of hardwood ash is available at many farm stores and garden centers for $3 to $5. Buy hardwood ash: oak, hickory, maple, fruitwood. Softwood ash from pine or fir has lower mineral content and weaker alkalinity. Hardwood is the one that works. I want to take a moment here, because this is the part that matters, and it goes beyond slugs and antlines. Think about what we have just walked through. A bucket of ash from last night's fire, free, available to any household that burns wood, effective against more crawling pests than most products sold on the shelf, completely safe. Safe for your soil, for your earthworms, for your honeybees, for your children running barefoot through the garden. And it has been doing this job on farms like mine, on farms like your great-grandmother's, since long before anyone decided to put pest control in a canister and drive it to your door in a white truck. The exterminator charges $800 a year. He will tell you that the pests will come back without him. He is right that the pests will come back. He is wrong that you need him. The pest control industry in this country brings in $16 billion a year. 16 billion. That number is possible because most homeowners have been separated from the knowledge that their grandparents had and never knew they were missing it. The knowledge did not disappear. It was not taken. It simply stopped being passed on, one generation at a time, as the spray bottles appeared on the shelves and the white trucks started coming down the road, and the old ways started to seem quaint and unnecessary to people who no longer had any reason to remember them. My grandfather never called an exterminator. His grandfather never called one. The ash bucket by the wood stove, the salt line at the threshold, the ash worked into the grain bin. These were not special techniques. They were just what you did. They were as ordinary as planting by the moon or keeping the root cellar stocked before winter. Knowledge so common it was invisible. The white truck has made it invisible again, in the other direction. Replaced it with something that costs $800 a year and has to come back every month because the moment it stops, everything returns. That is not pest control. That is a subscription to the illusion of pest control, billed annually, for as long as you own your house. There is something else worth saying about ash that goes beyond the pest control. When you lay an ash line around a garden bed, you are not just keeping slugs out. You are returning minerals to the soil. The potassium and calcium in that ash feed the plants you are protecting. The same material that kills the pest enriches the ground. There is no chemical residue left behind, no dead zone in the soil, no harm done to the earthworms working just below the surface. The ash does its job and then becomes part of the land. That is a kind of elegance you will not find in a spray canister. The canister leaves a residue. The ash leaves a garden. Your ash bucket does not bill you. It does not need a monthly visit. It does not kill the earthworms in your garden soil or the honeybees working your flowers. It is what the land produces when wood burns, returned to the land in a form the land already knows how to use. So here is what I want you to do this week. If you have a wood stove or a fireplace, open the ash drawer right now and look at what is in it. That ash, dry and gray and smelling faintly of last winter's fires, is the most effective slug and ant barrier you will ever use. Take a metal bucket with a lid and start collecting it. Keep it dry. Keep it covered. This weekend, walk your garden. Walk your porch. Walk every threshold and every bed edge where something has been eating what you planted or coming inside uninvited. Lay your first ash line, 2 inches wide, unbroken, applied in dry weather. For ant thresholds, add the salt on top. For grain storage, add a cup worked through every 50 pounds. And come back here and tell me in the comments, what pest has been costing you the most this season? Slugs in the garden? Ants in the pantry? Beetles in the grain? Tell me what state you are in, what you grow, and what you find when you lay that first line. I read every one of these. The stories you send back from your own places teach the new folks more than I ever could. Next time, I'm going to show you something my grandfather used in the barn that most people have never heard of. A simple mixture of 3 things already in your kitchen that keeps rats and mice away from stored grain without a single trap, without poison, and without the problem ever getting large enough to need either. It is the kind of thing that works so quietly and so consistently that you forget it is working until the day you stop doing it. Subscribe. Do not miss it. Until then, open that ash drawer, look at what is in it, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just beginning to remember.